There is a quiet truth we rarely speak aloud. Love isn't just something that happens to us, it's something we unknowingly invite. Some women keep repeating the same painful pattern, choosing partners who drain, diminish, or disregard them. And then there are women who seem to attract partners who love deeply, commit wholeheartedly, and show up consistently, not because they are lucky, but because their inner world has been shaped by healing, clarity, and emotional self-respect. These women aren't perfect, but they are awake. They don't wait for someone to choose them. They learn to choose themselves first. And that single shift changes every relationship they enter. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that her heart has been negotiating for love it didn't deserve, that she stayed too long in places where she felt unseen, that her loyalty was greater than the care she received. But the women who attract truly loving, emotionally mature men, they reach a different moment, a moment of awakening. They look at their old wounds not as proof that they are unlovable, but as evidence of where they once settled for too little. They begin to understand that the partners they choose mirror the relationship they have with themselves. And so, they begin the hardest work of all. They stop abandoning their own inner world. These women know that the right man is not impressed by perfection. He is moved by presence, by honesty, by emotional truth, but he can only meet a woman as deeply as she meets herself. So these women make a brave decision. They refuse to negotiate against their own worth. They refuse to silence their needs to keep someone close. They refuse to mistake anxiety for attraction or chaos for chemistry. They watch behaviors instead of believing promises. They trust patterns instead of fantasies. They choose clarity over confusion, even when clarity hurts. And most importantly, they choose partners who expand their sense of safety, not recreate their childhood wounds. They understand that love is not meant to feel like emotional survival. It is meant to feel like home, a place where your nervous system can finally exhale. The best men are drawn to women who know their emotional landscape, who speak their truth without apology, who have learned that peace is more seductive than perfection. These women set a standard not with anger, but with self-respect. They do not chase. They do not cling. They do not contort themselves to be chosen. Why? Because they know something most people learn too late. The man who truly loves you will move toward you, not make you shrink. A good man is not intimidated by a woman with boundaries. He is grateful for her clarity. He knows where she stands, so he knows how to stand with her. But these women also understand when it's time to walk away. They don't hold on to potential. They hold on to their peace. They walk away not because they don't care, but because they've finally learned to care for themselves. The best men, the emotionally present, loving, steady men are drawn to women who have made peace with their past, who honor their own needs, and who refuse to live in emotional negotiation ever again. These women don't get the best men by being better. They get them by being whole. And wholeness is the most powerful magnet in the world. A woman who attracts the right kind of love learns, often through pain, that abandoning herself is the first wound long before any man ever disappoints her. She remembers the nights she softened her voice, quieted her needs, made herself smaller, all in the hope that someone would finally stay. She remembers the way her body felt when she ignored her intuition, how her nervous system tightened every time she betrayed her own truth just to keep the peace. And she remembers how exhausting it was to carry a relationship on her back, believing that if she just tried a little harder, loved a little more, tolerated a little longer, she would finally be chosen. But then something within her breaks open, not in destruction, but in awakening. She begins to see that every time she silenced her needs, she taught someone that her needs didn't matter. Every time she overextended, she taught someone that she was willing to be depleted. Every time she tolerated disrespect, she taught someone that this was the cost of staying in her life. The woman she was before learned love through sacrifice. The woman she is becoming learns love through truth. She refuses to abandon herself now because she understands the cost. Self-abandonment isn't just emotional, it rewrites the body. It teaches the heart to expect less. It teaches the mind to rationalize mistreatment. It teaches the soul to live in a constant state of negotiation. And she knows that no relationship is worth losing herself for. She realizes that love that requires her disappearance is not love, It is emotional hunger disguised as connection. So she makes a quiet, revolutionary decision. She will not dim her light to make someone else comfortable. She will not swallow her pain to keep someone close. She will not pretend she is fine just to avoid being too much. She will not trade authenticity for attachment. She chooses to stay with herself even when someone else cannot stay with her. That is the moment everything shifts, because a woman who refuses to abandon herself becomes grounded, rooted, unshakable. Her presence changes the dynamic of every room she enters. She becomes a mirror that reflects back the kind of love she knows she deserves. The wrong men feel uneasy around her because she no longer bends. The right men feel drawn to her because she no longer disappears. She does not fear walking away, not because she is cold, but because she is finally warm toward herself. This is why she attracts partners who recognize her worth. She embodies it. She holds her boundaries without aggression. She speaks her needs without apology. She chooses connection, but not at the cost of her own emotional safety. She refuses once and for all to sacrifice herself just to be chosen. And the beautiful irony is this: the moment she chooses herself first, she becomes the kind of woman a good man never wants to lose. Women who attract emotionally healthy, committed men develop a skill that many overlook. They learn to recognize emotional patterns before they become emotional traps. They don't wait for the pain to become unbearable. And they don't drown in excuses just to keep a connection alive. They've lived through what happens when you ignore the first signs, the tightening in the chest, the subtle disrespect, the inconsistency that feels strangely familiar. They've learned how easy it is to rewrite reality when you desperately want someone to be better than they are. In the past, they would explain away everything. He's just busy. He didn't mean it like that. He's going through a lot. He'll change once things settle. They used to give endless benefit of the doubt because they confused compassion with self-neglect. They believed that understanding someone else's pain meant they should tolerate their behavior. But with time, they learned that red flags don't disappear when you explain them. They strengthen. Every justification becomes another thread holding together a relationship that was never safe to begin with. So now, these women see patterns with extraordinary clarity, not because they are suspicious, but because they are self-aware. They notice when someone is inconsistent, because they've lived the heartbreak of depending on someone emotionally unpredictable. They notice when a man dismisses their feelings, because they remember the years when they questioned their own emotional reality. They notice when intimacy only deepens on their side, because they know the loneliness of loving someone who is present in body but absent in spirit. They don't need dramatic proof. The early signs are enough. A small discomfort in their body is information. A recurring behavior is data. A pattern that mirrors an old wound is a warning. They don't wait for the story to repeat in full. The first paragraph is enough to tell them what book they're reading. But what truly sets them apart is this: they don't shame themselves for seeing the truth anymore. They don't run from discomfort or minimize what they feel. Instead, they trust their internal signals. They honor their intuition with the same seriousness they once reserved only for someone else's needs. They understand that recognizing a red flag is not pessimism. It is self-protection. It is emotional maturity. They refuse to build a fantasy around a man's potential while ignoring his patterns. They know that real love is revealed in behavior, not words, and because they no longer cling to illusions, they walk away from anything that resembles old pain dressed in new clothing. This clarity becomes their strength. It saves them years of emotional exhaustion. It pulls them toward partners who show consistency, respect, and depth. It protects their heart from men who love the idea of them but can't meet the reality. And ironically, it is this discernment, this refusal to justify the unjustifiable, that makes a healthy man feel safe with them. Because he knows he's standing beside a woman who values truth over fantasy, who sees clearly, and who will not disappear into denial. She recognizes patterns early because she finally recognizes herself. Women who attract emotionally healthy, steady, loving partners understand something most people never learn. Their needs are not burdens, they are signals of their humanity. But they didn't always believe this. Many of them grew up in environments where expressing needs led to dismissal, conflict, or punishment. They learned early that staying quiet was safer than being honest. They learned that being low maintenance was the only way to stay loved. And so they practiced shrinking, smoothing over tension, and silencing discomfort. But silence has a cost. It corrodes the self. It creates relationships where one person is seen and the other is invisible. Eventually, often after heartbreak, they reached a profound realization. When you don't name your needs, you teach people to treat you as if you have none. This is where the transformation begins. These women learn to communicate with a different energy, an energy rooted in truth, not fear. They no longer brace themselves before speaking. They no longer rehearse their words to sound less emotional. They no longer apologize for wanting connection, consistency, affection, honesty, loyalty, or clarity. They understand that these are not demands, they are emotional necessities. They name their needs the way someone opens a window in a room that's been closed for too long, gently, but with certainty. They say things like, "I feel disconnected, can we talk? I need reliability, not guesswork. I need emotional presence, not just physical company. I need clarity about where this is going." And they say it without trembling inside, without waiting for permission, without fearing they'll be too much. Because now they understand that a man who is right for them will never punish them for honesty. The wrong men will. But the right man will lean in. He will listen. He will respond, not react. These women communicate needs without guilt because they finally realize guilt was never theirs to carry. Their needs aren't unreasonable, their old standards were. Their requests aren't excessive, their old silence was too deep. They no longer apologize for wanting what every human heart requires to feel safe. And what happens when they communicate with this kind of grounded clarity? They filter out men who are emotionally unavailable, defensive, or threatened by intimacy. They naturally attract men who appreciate emotional honesty, who feel relieved by clear communication, and who want to meet them where they are. Their needs become a compass that guides them toward healthier relationships. Most beautifully, they learn that expressing needs is not confrontation, it is connection. It is an invitation to deeper intimacy. It is a declaration. I value this relationship enough to be honest. I value myself enough to speak. They no longer whisper, hide, or negotiate against their own heart. They speak because their voice deserves space. They express because their emotional world deserves respect. They ask because they finally believe they are worthy of receiving. When a woman communicates with this kind of emotional clarity, she doesn't just get the best men, she gets the men who are capable of love. Women who call an emotionally mature, loving partners have one defining shift in their inner world. Their boundaries come from truth, not fear. They are no longer drawing lines to control someone else's behavior, nor to keep love from slipping through their fingers. Their boundaries arise from a deep understanding of who they are and what keeps them emotionally safe. In the past, they may have set boundaries only when pushed to their breaking point, after betrayal, after inconsistency, after disrespect had piled up. Their boundaries used to be reactive, trembling, formed in desperation. They were afraid that if they asked for too much, they would lose the relationship. They feared that speaking their truth would drive someone away. And so they tiptoed around their own limits, hoping their silence would preserve the connection. But over time, they discovered the painful truth. A love that requires the abandonment of your boundaries is a love that never truly existed. So they learned to set boundaries not as walls, but as expressions of self-awareness. Their boundaries no longer come from panic, they come from clarity. They don't set them to test someone, they set them to protect the parts of themselves that were once wounded by overextension, emotional chaos, or neglect. Their boundaries sound like, I don't continue conversations that turn disrespectful. I don't stay where I feel minimized. I don't accept inconsistency as a form of love. I don't sacrifice my mental peace to maintain a connection. These are not threats. They are statements of truth. They are simple, grounded reflections of how they now move through the world. When their boundaries come from truth, they lose the need to explain them excessively, justify them endlessly, or soften them so others don't feel uncomfortable. They don't beg someone to understand. They simply embody their truth. They don't fear someone walking away because they know they are not responsible for someone else's inability to meet them. They understand that a person who leaves because of their boundaries is not a loss, it's clarity, and this is what makes their presence powerful. They no longer use boundaries as a last defense, they use them as a daily practice of self-respect. These women don't grasp, cling, or chase. They don't rewrite their truth to keep someone close. They value emotional safety more than emotional proximity. They trust that the right partner will rise to meet their boundaries, not resist them. The right partner will feel anchored by their clarity, not threatened by it. He will understand that a woman with boundaries is a woman who knows how to love without losing herself. Most importantly, these women embody a profound knowing. A boundary is not a barrier to love, it is a pathway to healthier love. Their boundaries come from the deepest, quietest part of themselves, the part that remembers every moment they abandon their own needs and refuses to repeat that story. And ironically, it is this unwavering honesty with themselves that attracts partners who are honest, respectful, and emotionally brave. Because boundaries rooted in truth don't push the right people away, they draw them closer. Women who attract emotionally steady, deeply loving partners develop a sensitivity that most people ignore, the wisdom of the nervous system. They no longer measure a relationship by someone's charm, promises, or potential. They measure it by what their body feels like when they are with someone. Because they've lived through relationships where their chest tightened every time a message went unanswered, where their breath shortened whenever the tone shifted, where their stomach dropped when they sensed emotional unpredictability. They've lived through the pain of loving someone whose presence felt like walking on eggshells. So now they listen to the earliest signals. Their body whispers before their mind can rationalize. Their intuition speaks before their hope can rewrite the story. Their nervous system contracts, shrinks, before the red flags become undeniable. And they take that contraction seriously. They no longer override their inner alarms with fantasies. They no longer numb themselves with explanations. They no longer say, maybe it's just me, when their entire being is telling them differently. They trust their discomfort because they finally understand that the body feels truth long before the mind accepts it. When their nervous system shrinks, it's not paranoia, it's information. It's the echo of old wounds saying, we have been here before. It's the wisdom of survival saying, this does not feel safe. It's the part of them that once stayed too long saying, don't abandon me again. And so these women make the courageous choice to walk away early, not dramatically, not with bitterness, but with quiet self-respect. They walk away when consistency feels unpredictable. They walk away when affection feels conditional. They walk away when clarity feels withheld. They walk away when intimacy feels one-sided. They walk away when their body tightens more than it softens. Because they learn something profound. Love should not make your nervous system shrink. Love should expand you. It should relax your shoulders, deepen your breath, soften your heart. The right partner doesn't constrict you. He gives you space to unfold. These women no longer wait for emotional chaos to escalate before choosing themselves. The moment their body gives them even the faintest tremor of contraction, they pause, they listen, they observe. And if the pattern continues, they leave, not out of fear but out of wisdom. Walking away is no longer an act of loss. It is an act of protection. It is an act of self-loyalty. It is an act of honoring the version of themselves they've fought so hard to become. And ironically, this is the trait that attracts mature, emotionally anchored men, because a woman who honors her nervous system is a woman who cannot be manipulated. She cannot be breadcrumbed. She cannot be kept in limbo. She cannot be drawn into chaos. She knows what safety feels like, and she demands it not with force, but with presence. When she walks away at the first sign of shrinking, she sends a clear message to the world. My peace is not negotiable. And the moment she holds that standard, the right man, the man who brings expansion rather than contraction, recognizes her, and he meets her with the kind of love her nervous system can finally relax into. There comes a moment when a woman finally understands that love is not something she must suffer for, shrink for, or beg for. It is something she aligns with by honoring the deepest truths of her own heart. The women who attract the best men do not do so through perfection, beauty, or performance. They do so by refusing to abandon themselves ever again. They recognize their patterns. They speak their needs. They protect their peace. They trust their bodies. They draw boundaries from truth. They walk away when their soul begins to dim. And in doing so, they become the kind of women who no longer chase love. They become women who invite love that is real, steady, and emotionally safe. Because the moment a woman chooses herself with unwavering honesty, she creates a life where only those who can meet her depth, respect her heart, and honor her presence are allowed to stay. This is not the story of being chosen by a good man. This is the story of becoming the woman who chooses herself first, and in doing so, becomes impossible for the wrong man to keep and unforgettable for the right man to love. That is her power. That is her becoming.